Brendel. He is the owner of BearcatJournal.com to get one final preview and look at Cincinnati before the game tonight. Chad, how are you this morning?
Doing good. Heading in to do. I got noon to 3 today on Cincinnati's ESPN 1530. So headed that way.
Oh, there you go. You got the same gig we got, just middays today, huh?
Exactly.
How are you feeling about just general, I guess, vibes, thoughts, feelings around the program? Not just about the Nebraska game specifically, but heading into the season, how are you feeling about Cincinnati right now?
I think they should be pretty good. What that equates to, it's really hard to tell in the Big 12 because there's probably 12 teams that are all fairly even. So record's going to come down to execution and, the cliche stuff. It tends to be a pretty important factor in this league, but I think they have a really good quarterback. I think they've got a strong running game. They should have good wide receivers. The defense, there's a few questions, but, you've got a potential all-conference guy in Dante Corleone, a potential all-conference guy in Jake Golday at linebacker. So the talent is there. And now we find out is, how does Scott Satterfield handle a pretty good Big 12 with a team that should be competitive?
So, Chad, you mentioned a couple guys on the defense side of the ball, and I'm glad you have, because just full disclosure, a lot of this show we've talked about Nebraska's defense against Brendan Sorsby and the Cincinnati offense. When you flip it around, you're looking at those potential all-conference guys. Corleone's going to be an NFL draft pick. And you look at what Nebraska has on the offensive side of the ball. They bring in Dana Holgerson. You've got Dylan Raiola year 2. They bring in some new transfers at wide receiver. How do you see that part of the matchup shaking out?
And the question is going to be, I think, can they make Raiola uncomfortable? The Cincinnati fans are very familiar with Dana Holgerson from his time at Houston. He wants his guys to get the ball out pretty quick.
Yeah.
So you're not generally going to, get a great pass rush. So with that in mind, they've got to be able to at least make him uncomfortable because he's going to take the snap. He's going to get the ball out, but you've got to kind of get him off the spot. He can't sit back there and pick apart Tyson Vite's zone defense. If they don't do that, I think Raiola's got a chance to have a pretty good game. The question is going to be, what did Holgerson say in his press conference this week? Corleone retired 3 guys in the first drive in Houston a couple years ago.
Yeah.
If he can be a problem, and that's the strength, that's the interesting thing. The strength of Nebraska's offensive line is in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And Corleone comes right at you up the gut. If they can hold him at bay, I think the Nebraska offense can have a pretty good game. If they can't, and he can get pushed up the middle of the field and make Raiola uncomfortable in that pocket, I think Cincinnati's got a chance defensively to at least make them uncomfortable. And I think that's the biggest key with the Dana Holgerson offense. It's rhythm, it's timing, it's quick. You got to make them uncomfortable. Will Cincinnati be able to do that?
Chad, you mentioned that zone defense for Cincinnati. They ran very little man-to-man, if I remember correctly, last year. Dylan did pretty well, especially early in the season, against zone defenses. Do you think we might see Cincinnati try and change things up at all? Or you think, hey, this is what we do, we're going to try and do it well and try and affect Dylan in other ways?
That's going to be interesting. I do think they are – the system is very similar. Tyson Vite came from Iowa State and brought that 3-3-5 stack brought that 3-3-5 stack with him. It's very similar. Now, the difference is it's not a defense that quarterbacks see a lot because it's got 3 safeties. So you've got an extra safety in the middle of the field. That makes it a little bit different for a quarterback's eyes because guys aren't where, a quarterback necessarily expects them to be in that zone defense. So I do think they're still going to play a lot of zone, but I think they're going to count on it being something that Raiola hasn't seen where, he's going to have to adjust his eyes a little bit and, anticipate guys being in places that maybe he doesn't expect them to be. He's been really, he was top 10 in completion percentage against zone defense last year. So that's going to definitely be something to keep an eye on.
Speaking of keeping it on Cincinnati's defense, aside from Corleone, who is going to be another guy on that Bearcat defense that Nebraska fans are just going to get upset at seeing, around the ball or making stops for the Bearcats?
Jake Golday is really the name to watch. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list. He was a defensive end before he got to Cincinnati. They moved him to linebacker. He's 6'3", 230 pounds, runs 22 miles an hour, was all conference last year, and just kind of a specimen of a kid that really has a nose for the football. They've got him at outside linebacker. They're going to use him a little bit to get after the quarterback. And he's a guy that I think you're going to see a lot if they are going quick. The other thing, Holgorsen, I'm not telling you guys anything new. Holgorsen likes to throw to his backs. And I think you're going to see Golday in that mix quite a bit. If he makes plays and, you can hold those quick throws to 2-3 yards instead of 5 to 7 yards, then you get to find out how Cincinnati's defense can play, keeping Nebraska behind the sticks. But that's probably the other big name to watch, as he's going to be on draft boards. He's going to be a guy that is kind of the focal point of that defense in the middle of the field.
So when you look at the other side of the ball, Chad, for Cincinnati, you've got obviously Brennan Sorsby, you got Walker coming in from Wisconsin. I know you've got the transfer wide receivers as well, but I want to talk about the offensive line with a bunch of new starters up there. And what does that look like for you? What's your, if I'm sitting there and I go, hey, we're basically replacing the entire offensive line or most of it, I that would probably be my number one concern, especially the way Satterfield kind of talked about him earlier and not really being the strength of the team. How do they be successful on the offensive line tonight?
I don't think it's a talent issue on the offensive line. I think it's a what do these guys look like in their first start together question. Tarantayo, a transfer from Ball State, 6'4", 320 pounds, just a nasty physical interior offensive lineman. He's next to Kevin Gerhardt, who's a 3-year captain, kind of the rock of the offense at center. And I think the biggest question for Cincinnati fans, everybody's very excited about Joe Cotton. He was the number 1 left tackle in the spring transfer portal. They beat out a bunch of big-name Power 5 programs to get him, but he's moving up from FCS. And he has not seen, this type of skill and athleticism at the point of attack. How does he hold up? How does Joe Cotton play in his first game? They think the inside the building, they feel he's an NFL left tackle. He's 6'7", he's 320 pounds, he moves well, he's got long arms, but can he hold up over 4 quarters against a talented but inexperienced Nebraska defensive line? I think Cincinnati's going to be fine on the interior. The tackle spot, especially left tackle with Cotton and how quickly he adjusts, I think is going to be the big question mark.
Chad, when you look at this game and you look at, the things that Cincinnati needs to do to be successful, is there a specific area of the game or statistical category that you're going to be able to look at and say, hey, if this goes Cincinnati's way, I like their chances?
I think it's the run game. Because I don't, looking at Nebraska's defensive line, there's talent there, but not a lot of guys that have played a lot of snaps. And the bread and butter of Scott Satterfield's offense has always been running the football. They've got a big physical guy in Towie Walker, the transfer from Wisconsin, like you said. And then they've got a home run hitter that transferred from Ohio State last year, Evan Pryor, that broke off a bunch of long touchdown runs last year. So if Cincinnati I can control that portion of the game and maybe keep that Nebraska offense off the field a little bit more, I think that bodes very well for this, going in Cincinnati's direction.
That is Chad Brendel, owner of Bearcat Journal. Chad, appreciate the time. As always, enjoy the game tonight, but selfishly, I hope you don't enjoy it too much. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.